Hey everybody, today I'm going to be talking about building EPEL 10 on CentOS Stream. My name is Carl George. I'm the EPEL team lead at Red Hat. Carl W. George on most social media. You can also email me, Carl at Red Hat, although fair warning, I'm pretty bad at email, so that's not a super reliable way to get a hold of me. First, a quick disclaimer. As Sean said, this is like a 20-minute talk time slot, but there's a lot more than 20 minutes of context for today's topic. Ooh, that white slide's really lighting up my face. Hold on a second. There we go. Not quite as bad. So a lot more than 20 minutes of context for today's topic. If you want a more detailed, in-depth breakdown, there's a talk I gave at CentOS Connect earlier this year called EPEL 10 Overview. I highly recommend it. I put it in the notes for this talk as kind of a recommended viewing beforehand. If you haven't already watched that and are out of the loop, just try to follow along, go back and watch that later, and it'll give you a lot more details and probably answer some of the questions that'll come up in the Q&A. But because of the limited time, this talk's mostly going to be a status update for those people that have already been following along or even participating. But I will give you a quick background summary. What we're doing with EPEL 10 is really rooted in the fact that RHEL has minor versions. That's kind of our guiding principle for this. EPEL 7 and earlier ignored this fact entirely. It was just major version, and it just always tracked the current minor version of RHEL. It was built on RHEL, and then it was used on RHEL and CentOS. That mostly worked because CentOS was a month behind RHEL at the time. But the CentOS Stream changes in 8 and 9 made it where EPEL 8 and 9 couldn't ignore this completely, because instead of being a month behind RHEL, it was now about 6 months ahead of RHEL, which is a lot bigger gap for any packaging differences, any library changes where you would need a separate build to be compatible with both. EPEL Next was our initial partial fix for that. It worked for the most part. It was kind of bolted on to the workflows that we had, and it worked, but it was less than ideal. It was confusing for packagers. It was, confusing for users. Some people thought it was a completely separate EPEL for CentOS. That's not the case. It was just a limited thing for packages that needed to be rebuilt. But because of those pain points we saw with it, we started thinking about how we could solve the problem better. And what EPEL Next was really doing in a kind of a limited way was building for 2 minor versions at a time. The minor version of content that CentOS Stream reflected, and then the current minor version of RHEL. And so our plan was that the path forward would be just to fully embrace those minor versions in EPEL 10. So I'm going to give you an overview of the pipeline for packagers and what they can expect. You'll start in your distgit, which is the source for the packages. You'll start with an EPEL 10 branch there, just like you would expect for like previous EPEL branches where you'd have EPEL 8, EPEL 9. That'll feed into a EPEL 10 Koji target, which will be using CentOS Stream 10 as its external repo. The resulting build will have a dist tag of EL10_0. That'll be pulled into Bodhi updates that are for a Bodhi release of EPEL 10.0, and that will result in the build getting an EPEL 10.0 tag inside Koji. That'll get composed, and then it'll be published as pub EPEL 10. You may notice that we don't have minor versions at every step through this chart, and there's some good reasons for that. Going into it at the start, we knew from EPEL Next that a lot of packagers aren't going to be watching presentations like this. They're not going to be reading the docs. They're just going to be doing what they expect to do. And like they requested an EPEL 9 branch before, they're going to expect to request an EPEL 10 branch this go around. So we wanted it to be really easy for packagers to accidentally do the right thing. If they just do what they're expecting, they'll get the initial branch, and then they'll notice the minor version at different parts like in the build, but it won't affect how they have to do their workflow at all. With one exception, which we'll get into on the next slide. And then we'll have minor versions through different parts of that with the dist tag and the release and the tag. The repo path has to be published as just the major version also. That's because CentOS doesn't actually know what minor version it's on. It just knows the major version, so it wouldn't know a minor version repo to request. That's different for RHEL users, which fast forward in time, we're going to end up doing a mass branch event. You'll still have your EPEL 10 branch, but then you'll also get an EPEL 10.0 branch. That'll feed into an EPEL 10.0 Koji target, and that'll be using actual RHEL 10.0 as its external repo. Then the rest of it matches what we saw before with a 10_0 disk tag. The EPEL will keep using the same EPEL 10.0 Bodhi release and tags. So this kind of works with the way that packages in the base operating system themselves work. They'll show up in CentOS first, and then they become the next RHEL minor version. Similar thing here. We'll do it in the leading EPEL branch, and then it becomes the minor version branch when you look forward in time just a little bit. That will be published as pub EPEL 10.0 because RHEL does know its minor version. That's one of the progress items we'll talk about in a bit. And it can request EPEL. If you're on RHEL 10.0, we have a URL string that will request 10.0 or 10.1, whatever minor version you're on. The same string will work on CentOS to just request major version 10. By the time we get to this part of the workflow, your EPEL 10 branch is still going to exist, and it's still going to be building against CentOS, but it'll be a 10_1 disk tag, 10.1 Bodhi release and Koji tag, and so forth, but still published to the old pub EPEL 10 path on the mirrors. I'm sure that this part is the maintainer interaction part. There'll probably be a good bit of questions here. I'm not, because of the short time, I'm not going to go look at the Q&A yet. I'm going to go look at that at the end, but I can go back to any of these slides if we need to. So if you're asking more questions, typing it up, you can reference which slide you want to go back to. It'll help me out. I'll probably be able to tell from the question, though. So why are we making all these changes? What will be the benefits? The idea is that what we learned with EPEL Next was that it wasn't an intuitive structure. You had your main branch that was built against RHEL, and then there was an optional branch that built one minor version ahead. Sometimes you needed it, sometimes you didn't. If you did a rebuild there in that EPEL Next branch for a library change, you'd have to do the rebuild once there and then do the rebuild again whenever that library change landed in RHEL 6 months later. We didn't have a way to inherit builds between the two because it was a bolted-on solution. So with this model, it works. If you noticed any similarities with Fedora Rawhide and Fedora versions, that was kind of the inspiration for it, which is why I think it'll be an intuitive structure for Fedora packagers. You'll have the leading branch, either Rawhide or EPEL 10. You do your work there, and then it shows up in the next in the minor version after the mass branching event. That'll also let us inherit the builds between them, so you can just get everything working once, and then it flows through without any other disruptions. Because we'll be doing those branches automatically, there won't be any branching decisions. You don't have to decide when you actually need the next minor version branch. They'll just happen and be leading that way. We think this will result in a lot fewer uninstallable packages. Any KDE users have probably seen this before, where Qt got a library change in RHEL, but it happened in CentOS 6 months before. You had to do it. There was a big rebuild for an EPEL Next to get KDE working again, and then the same process would have to repeat once the same library change landed in RHEL. Troy's raising his hand because I invoked KDE. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can.
Sorry, I pushed the wrong button. I was trying to push the clap button.
Okay. So nothing to interject with. Okay, good.
Nope.
All right. But yeah, that rebuilding KDE for those changes, there would be a gap where both for CentOS and RHEL users, where everything wouldn't install and it wouldn't work correctly. We're hoping to have fewer cases of that, and not just for RHEL users. We'll also have fewer uninstallable packages for CentOS users. The idea is this is because we're going to be having a CentOS first build pipeline and methodology. With EPEL Next, a lot of times maintainers, if they didn't get a bug report or didn't notice it themselves, then the package would just be uninstallable in CentOS for 6 months. And then when the same change landed in RHEL, then they fixed the problem and avoided having to deal with creating a separate EPEL Next branch, kind of that whole month behind, 6 months ahead problem that I talked about. In the past, that month behind packagers could just kind of ignore things for a month, and it was okay, but not great. Now it's a lot bigger gap, and we're hoping to eliminate that because packagers will need to make sure that it's building on the leading branch and installable, and then once they have it resolved there, it'll just inherit into the next minor version and work for RHEL users on day one. So I think it'll be a better experience with fewer uninstallable packages for both RHEL and CentOS users. This will also give us per minor version archive repos. Right now, we sort of have minor version archive repos, but they're really just a snapshot on a certain day, like before RHEL 9.5 comes out, or on the day it comes out, we create a snapshot of EPEL 9 and we call it 9.4, which is prone to user error, and we have to time it right and all these things. In this setup, we'll have minor version repos that are just always correct, even if we don't move them to the archive space on the mirrors immediately or at a certain time. This will also let us do per minor version retirements. Right now, we kind of break policy a little bit. We don't retire packages in EPEL. The whole EPEL stands for Extra Packages for Enterprise Linux. Once it's in RHEL, it has to be retired from EPEL. We kind of look the other way when it shows up in CentOS. We do file a bug and let the maintainer know, like, hey, this is in CentOS now. Once it shows up in RHEL, we're going to retire the EPEL package. But we kind of violate policy for 6 months on the CentOS side, or bend the rules, however you want to look at it. This will actually set it up where we can retire it on the EPEL 10 branch and not have the conflict for CentOS users, but it stays in, say, the 10.0 branch for RHEL users until they get to 10.1, which has the new package that was added to the base operating system. So a lot of improvements all along the pipeline and how it works. So let's talk about our progress. I'm about halfway out of time, so I'm going to go quick. Progress things we've done so far, and this isn't all just me or my team. This is people around the community and different upstreams and things like that. So I'm not trying to claim credit for all these things, but I'm just going to talk quickly about what we all collectively have gotten done. DNF, we've added release for major and release for minor variables in there. On CentOS Stream 10, release for minor is not going to be set at all, which is how it's on the mirrors. It's going to expand to just asking for the major version. But on RHEL, you'll have the major and minor defined. There's also a limited parameter expansion feature, which is how we do that mechanism of having the same URL string that works on both. If you're curious exactly how that works, you can go look at the EPEL release package and look at the MetaLink URL that's in there. We carry the package signing key. We got that added in all the places: distribution GPG keys, Robo Signatory, which is Fedora's package signing service, and on the fedora.project.org security page. In Koji, we've done a lot of work. We had to set up the tag structure and plan that out, which involved external repos, build groups, targets. We also set up the side tag policy, so that works. There's also we had to bootstrap RPM auto spec. We couldn't just build it because RPM auto spec macros are in those dependencies of it. It's a little messy. We ended up tagging in Fedora 40 builds of it to get us an EPEL 10 build started. In Mirror Manager, we adjusted the scan regex so that it would detect minor version repos. Owner Sync Pagger, that is a tool that it listens for branch requests, and say when you request an EPEL 10 branch, it will add that package to the package allow list in Koji for the corresponding tag, which right now is 10.0. Historically, that was always the branch matched the tag name exactly, but we're breaking that expectation because right now EPEL 10 is 10.0 in the tags, and that'll change over time, and it depends on what the Koji build target is set up as. So we had to add some logic there and fix that assumption. There was a similar assumption in Pagger Dискit, which is the plugin to Pagger that lets us do a lot of our packaging things. We had to fix that assumption about the matching, the branch and the tag matching exactly. That was key so we could actually push to the branches. Fed package, we added minor version branch support and also the disk tag and validation logic if it was a valid EPEL package. Similarly, with the SCM request toddler, we added validation logic, and we also discovered a permissions issue. Wasn't directly related to EPEL 10, but we encountered it with this and were able to work through that. MD API, that is a service that it pulls in a bunch of repo data and gives you a REST API over it, so you can query what package, what versions in which releases. We found out that was originally written to work on PackageDB. PackageDB has been shut down, but it was still consuming like a static JSON file that was emulating PackageDB answers. So obviously that wasn't going to get updated for new releases. We worked to get that ported from PackageDB to Bodhi. We also added minor version logic to it. In Bodhi itself, we had to adjust the Punji template a few different ways. We created the EPEL 10.0 release. We'll have releases for each minor version going forward. Right now, we've actually set it up for automatic updates like Rawhide with 0 days in testing. We're going to be switching that off here pretty soon. the idea is that we're in like a pre-release soft launch phase right now, and it's quicker for packagers to get their like complicated dependency chains through without having to worry about necessarily doing side tags if they don't want to. So we can get a lot of packages bootstrapped quickly. But we will be turning that off. We'll turn on Composes by Bodhi and turn off the automatic updates and have an actual proper 7 days in testing like we do for earlier EPEL releases. Because we're not doing Composes in Bodhi right now, we have nightly Composes set up, which is what Rawhide does. We'll be turning those off here shortly, though, before the official announcement. A few other items that we've gotten done. We created EPEL release, EPEL RPM macros, those packages that are needed. We added the EPEL 10 version in Bugzilla. We've added EPEL 10 config files and mock core configs. Another really cool thing is we did a Hackfest at Flock. We got several pieces of this pipeline working by that point, some of it not yet, like the Composes, but that was when we told packagers, at least in the room, we said, okay, you can start building your packages now. And right after that, we also told the wider community, this is the soft launch for EPEL 10. It's not the official launch. It's not ready yet, but you can start building your packages and getting things ready. And that's been a huge success. We're over 9,000 RPMs already and from over 3,000 source RPMs. For context, EPEL 9 launched with 3 packages when we announced it. We haven't even announced EPEL 10 yet. And by the time for EPEL 9, by the time of the RHEL 9 launch, about 6 months later, it had gotten up to 2,600 source RPMs. So we've already exceeded that. We're way ahead of the game, which is just going to have great benefits for RHEL and CentOS users throughout the ecosystem. So the launch timeline. I keep talking about the RHEL 10 launch and things like that. I mentioned the Hackfest at Flock. That was in Q3 of this year, and we started our soft launch, which is the period we're in right now. In Q4, which is basically now, we're expecting the release of CentOS Stream 10 or the announcement of it. That's coming very soon, and we're trying to time it so that on the same day we do the official announcement or the official launch of EPEL 10 to correspond with that. Mainly because we know that if we announce one without the other, the first question is going to be, where is the other? Like if we announced CentOS Stream 10, people are saying, well, where's my EPEL? And same vice versa. In Q1 of next year, we're going to have the mass branching event for 10.0, and that's also when we're going to start EPEL 10.1, because that'll be about the time whenever CentOS Stream 10 can start getting RHEL 10.1 content. And then in Q2, right after that, is when we expect the release of RHEL 10. That's not a big secret. Anyone that's been paying attention to the lifecycle stuff, RHEL's on a 3-year major version cycle, 6-month minor version cycle, and RHEL 9 came out about 3 years before. I think it came out in 2022 Q2. So that's right around the time you can expect RHEL 10. And that's also the time when we're going to switch EPEL 10.0, which we'd have just branched. We're going to switch it from building against a CentOS Stream 10 snapshot and have it build against actual RHEL 10.0. So I fit in my talk, and I timed myself for 18 minutes, but I started a little late. So let me see what key questions we have in the Q&A tab. We might answer some on screen. I see one question that doesn't seem related to my talk. But if you have any other questions, I'll be around either in the Q&A thing here or on Matrix. We have the EPEL channel on Fedora's Matrix server, and I'm also in all the CentOS channels. There's one unofficial one on matrix.org, and there's also CentOS promo and a few SIG channels on Fedora's Matrix. But I think that's everything from me.
Cool. Do people want me to answer that? I could answer the question in there.
Sure. Go ahead.
I don't seem like it's not like I can't type in. The question, hello guys, I'm already running CentOS Stream 10. Will I have to, or do I have to reinstall from scratch once CentOS Stream 10 GA is available, or can I just upgrade the existing system? The answer is you should be able to just upgrade the existing system, but just note that you will have to reinstall almost every package. I can't think of a package you won't have to reinstall. We did a mass rebuild. That's why we weren't doing the GA until after this mass rebuild. but in theory, it should just work. But I'm sure the official answer might be, it's best to reinstall. But the reality is you'll have to update every package.
It's fine.
It's fine. It's fine. It'll be a big update.
To tie it back into the EPEL stuff, I mentioned how we've been building against CentOS Stream 10 already. I'm not anticipating any problems from this mass rebuild. We've had a handful, one or two things that we've noticed that we've actually had to rebuild in EPEL 10 because of changes in the pre-GA CentOS Stream 10. One small example, there was a couple of Perl packages we had to rebuild because Perl got rebased from 538 to 540. But luckily, there weren't a lot of Perl packages in EPEL 10 yet at that point, so it was very limited impact. That's just the nature of using it pre-GA, but I think the benefit of getting all those packages built early has been worth it for, was it 9,000 steps forward, 3 steps back? It'll work.